The first thing is the speed of light. Muslims believe that angels are created from light, and the angels communicate the affairs of God, which they get from what is known as a preserved tablet in outer space. And the speed at which they travel to and from this tablet, it turns out to actually be the speed of light. In the Quran, Surah 32 verse 5, it says, Allah rules the cosmic affairs from the heavens to the earth. Then this affair travels to him a distance in one day, at a measure of 1,000 years of what you count. Hence, in one day, the angels will travel a distance of 1,000 years according to the lunar calendar, because that's what Muslims counted at that time. The belief is that God is saying that the angels travel in one day the same distance that the moon travels in 12,000 lunar orbits. 12,000 lunar orbits or Earth days equals the speed of light. Now, science shows that. Now, the atmosphere protects us is the next thing. So the atmosphere protects Earth from radiation and meteorites. Now, this is also portrayed in the Quran 1400 years ago. In the Quran, Surah 21 verse 32, it says, "And we made the sky a protective shield, and they turn away from its sign." The next scientific miracle in the Quran is female bees are the worker bees. So worker bees are actually all females. Now, the Quran refers to bees that generate honey as females. So listen to this. In the Quran, Surah 16 verses 68 to 69, it says, "And your Lord revealed to the bees, build your hives in mountains, trees, and in what they build. Then eat from every fruit and follow your lord's enslaved paths. From its bellies exists drink of different color, in it healing for man." So in Arabic, the word eat or kuli is for females, and that's used in the Quran. And the term follow a path is the word usluki in Arabic, and that refers to females as well. As also the term its bellies is butuniha, and that's also used for females. The Quran also mentions hearing before seeing. So this is what I mean. So hearing is one of the first senses to develop. Now, this is only known in recent history, and it's also mentioned in the Quran. The Quran, Surah 76 verses 2, it says, "We created man from a fertilizing sperm to test him, and we made him hearing and seeing." Also, the Quran, Surah 23:78, it says, "It is he who produced for you the hearing and the eyesight and the feelings, but little gratitude you show." So the Quran always refers to the hearing before the seeing, which turned out to be the actual order of human development in the womb. Flight comes in at number 6. So the Quran is also believed by Muslims to have foretold that humans someday would be able to reach the sky. In Surah 29:22, it says, "You cannot escape Allah's might on earth or in the sky, and you have no protector and no savior besides Allah." Also in Surah 84:19, it says, "You will ride one layer from another layer." The word tabak in Arabic means a layer in English, and from this came certain myths about flying carpets, but now the flying aircrafts that go up layer upon layer are what we know today. Also, sound waves. According to the University of Washington, the original sound waves were not temperature variations, but they were actual real sound waves spreading around the universe. Now in the Quran, Surah 41 verse 11 indicates this, and it says, "Then he directed himself to the heaven when it was smoke, and then said to it and to the earth, 'Come willingly or by force.' They said, 'We do come willingly.'" So the heaven replying back implies that the heaven had a voice, which would mean it emitted a sound wave. Another miracle Muslims point to is high altitudes affect your breathing. As altitude increases, atmospheric pressures and oxygen levels in the atmosphere actually decrease, which eventually gets to a point where we can no longer breathe. Now, we all know this. The higher you go, the harder it is to breathe. Now in the Quran, Surah 6 verse 125, it says this, "Those whom Allah wants to guide, he opens their chests to Islam, and those whom he wants to leave astray, he makes their chests tight and constricted, as if they are ascending to the sky." Bones forming before muscles is also another miracle. Apparently the first formation of actual bones happens in the jawbone at day 41, and about 3 days later, that's when the associated muscles are formed. And in the Quran, Surah 23 verse 14, it says, "Then we develop the semen into a leech, then we develop the leech into a lump, then we develop the lump into bones, then we clothe the bones with flesh, then we produce it into another creature. Most blessed is Allah, the best of creators. Number 2, now we look at the part of the brain responsible for lying. So for centuries, everybody thought that the frontal part of the human brain was responsible for sight, because of course it's at the front of your head. But we know now that the part responsible for vision is actually at the back of the brain. So if you fall back and hit the back of your head, it could affect your sight or make your eyes go cross-eyed. But now science shows us that the frontal part of our brain, or the prefrontal cortex, is responsible for forming intelligent thoughts like creating lies. And Muslims quote the Quran, Surah 96 verse 16, that says, "A lying, sinful forehead," which indicates that lying is happening in the front of your head. Now, number 1, we have planets, stars, and all of the celestial bodies are actually moving. For centuries, it was believed that the Earth was fixed and the sun and the moon and other planets and the stars and all that revolved around the Earth. But an interesting passage from the Quran that the Muslims point to is Surah 39 verses 5, and it says, "Allah created the heavens and the earth in truth. He overlaps the night over the day and overlaps the day over the night and enslaves the sun and the moon. All move to a pre-recorded destiny." Miracle number 10 is the color of water. Years ago, people thought that water was just transparent. No one thought that the color of water could actually turn black. But scientists have actually discovered a new characteristic of water. At a higher pressure, the water molecules become half liquid and half solid. Now, what's called superionic water forms in higher temperatures and pressures. It's very dark and thicker than, well, water. And the Quran says that in the heat of hellfire, water actually looks really dark, like tar. It's mentioned in the Quran in Surah 18 verse 29. It says, "We have prepared for the unjust a fire whose curtains will hem them in. And when they cry for relief, they will be relieved with water like tar, which scald their faces." Number 9 is the process of photosynthesis. So photosynthesis is a process used by plants and other organisms to convert light energy into energy that they can use. And in the Quran, Surah 18 verse 35, it says, "And cite for them the parable of the present life. It is like water that we send down from the sky. The plants of the earth absorb it, but then it becomes debris scattered by the winds." Now, photosynthesis converts carbon dioxide and water into oxygen and sugar. Most of the water evaporates back into the atmosphere, which the term debris points to in the Quran. Gardens being therapeutic come in at number 8. Reductions in stress, as well as tiredness, depression, anger, anxiety, have all been documented when people actually go into gardens. Engagement with gardens has increasingly been recognized as not only a cost-effective health intervention, but also a treatment or occupational therapy for those with psychological health issues, and this is done with what is called horticultural therapy. Now, this statement comes from the National Center of Biotechnology Information. Gardening is beneficial for health, a meta-analysis published in 2016. And the Quran, Surah 27 verse 60, it says, "Or who created the heavens and the earth, and rains down water from the sky for you? With it produces joyful gardens whose trees you could not produce." Now, the term bahjat means joy or delight in Arabic, and that's the word used. So in this verse, gardens are actually bringing joy or delight, and since today's gardens are being prescribed as a natural antidepressant of sorts, Muslims view this as a miracle. Next up, we have meteorites. So when a meteor enters the atmosphere, the meteor heats up so much that it starts to shine, and then the air burns the meteor, and poof, nothing is left, right? In the Quran, Surah 52 verses 44, it says, "Even if they were to see lumps of the sky falling down, they would say, a mass of clouds." So people would think that they're clouds because of the ashes that are left after the meteor gets and Muslims say, yeah, that's a miracle. Miracle number 6 is female spiders spinning webs. It's generally accepted that adult female spiders spin the webs while adult males do not, outside of looking to mate. This is according to Speely, Do Only Female Spiders Build Webs, published in 2019, this year. And in the Quran, Surah 29 verse 41, it says, "The likeness of those who take to themselves protectors other than Allah is that of the spider. It builds a house, but the most fragile of houses is the spider's house, if they only knew." Now, when it says those who take, The term in Arabic is ittakata, and that's for males. Now ittakatat is for females, and the Quran uses the female version. At number 5, we look at the mountains having roots as well as floating. So the highest point of the earth is in the Himalayas at Mount Everest, standing at 8.8 kilometers high. Now this mountain has actually 250 kilometers of deep roots. This was recorded in Life Science Depth of Himalayan Mountain Roots Revealed back in the year 2010. Now the Quran in 2 places says mountains as pegs, as well as it says, and mountains he anchored. So pegs are used to hold a tent or something in place, and pegs have a part of it above the ground as well as another part that's into the ground, and the Arabic word means anchored, and this is actually a term that applies to ships floating on water, like when they're anchored to land. So similarly, this is how mountains or other landforms really actually float above a semi-molten asthenosphere. Yeah, Google that term, asthenosphere. Female ants come in at number 4. So check this. All male ants have wings. All worker ants are females, and all ants that don't have wings are females. Now in the Quran, Surah 27 verse 18, it mentions this. Until when they came upon the valley of ants, and the ants said, "O ants, enter your homes so that you do not be crushed by Solomon and his soldiers while they do not feel it." Now for the word said, kala is for males and kalat is for females. Now the Quran of course uses kalat for females. So if the ants actually had wings, it would have just flown away. However, they didn't have an option in this context in the Quran, but rather they had to go and hide into their home. So Muslims believe that the ant is correctly addressed as a female in this passage, which they identify as being another miracle. Number 3, the universe is expanding. So scientists today do not know what dark energy actually is, but they do know, however, that it exists and it's causing the entire universe to expand. In the Quran, Surah 51 verse 47, it says, "And the heaven we built with craftsmanship, and we are still expanding." The Quran also said that everything is made of pairs, and today we know that all matter is actually in pairs. So matter and antimatter, electrons and positrons, and so on. And in the Quran, Surah 36 verse 36, it says, "Glory to him who created in pairs all things that the land produces, and their own kind, and other things of that they have no knowledge of." And finally, at number 1, continental drift. So back in the year 2014, the National Geographic published "How do we know the continents are moving?" And this is what they said. 50 years ago, continental drift was a fringe hypothesis rejected by most geologists. Today, the theory of plate tectonics is universally accepted as true and unifies one separate areas of geology under one grand banner. There are mountains of evidence that plate tectonics had taken place in our planet's past. Now, the Muslims point to Quran 27 verses 88, and it says, "You see the mountains and think they are firmly fixed, but they are moving away just like the clouds are moving away." Let's take a look. Starting at number 10, Surah Nuh, also known as Noah. In Surah Nuh, which is the 71st chapter of the Quran, it has 28 verses in this chapter, and that makes the difference between these two numbers 43, as 71 take away 28 equals 43. And something that Muslims point to is that it turns out that the prophet Nuh, or Noah, is mentioned in the Quran exactly 43 times. Besides this, there are 43 chapters following Surah Nuh until the end of the Quran, and these 43 chapters contain no mention of Noah at all. Also, the chapters of the Quran that do mention the prophet Nuh, they're 28 in total, which is the exact number of verses in Surah Nuh. Number 9 leads us to the math miracle in Surah Al-Naml. In Surah Al-Naml, which is the 27th chapter of the Quran, there's a total of 93 verses in this chapter. Now this chapter begins with apparent random letters, and in Surah 21 verses 1, this is what it says: Ta Sin. These are the verses of the Quran and a clear book. Now the term Ta and Sin, which are written as single unit and pronounced together as Ta Sin, the first letter appears throughout the chapter 27 times, which also of course is the chapter number, and also the second apparently random letter appears 93 times, which is the exact number of verses in that chapter. Surah Al-Naml comes in at number 8. Another thing to note is that the code of 16 found in Surah Al-Naml, which is in the 16th chapter of the Quran, there's a note that the male bees known as drones, have 16 chromosomes, while the female worker bees as well as the queen bees have 16 pairs of chromosomes. On top of that, another thing to note is that the queen bees emerge from the egg in 16 days, and the number of verses in this chapter is 128, which is a multiple of 16, because 16 times 8 is 128. And of course, half of the number 128 is 64, which is another multiple of 16. And researchers have found that 64 of this chapter's verses contain the name of Allah, while 64 of them do not contain the name of Allah. Let's look at the math miracle now in Surah 96. First verses of the Quran that Muslims believe were revealed to the Prophet Muhammad were the first 5 verses of chapter 96, and in the Quran that says, "Recite in the name of your Lord who created man from a clinging substance. Recite, and your Lord is most generous, who taught by the pen, taught man that which he knew not." That's specifically found in Surah 96 verses 1 to 5. Now the name of the chapter is the alaq, which scholars have described as an early stage of a human being inside of the womb. And now the Arabic word alaq, which translates to clinging substance, is the 9th word in the Arabic surah. Now the 9th prime number in math is 23, which is the exact number of DNA chromosome pairs found in humans. The miracle at number 6 involves prime numbers. Prime numbers, which have confused mathematicians for many years. They make up a really strong and recurring key element throughout the Quran. Another prominent key element in the Quran includes specific words and numbers such as 114, which is the total number of chapters in the Quran. So I'll probably leave some of those for part 2. There's a whole lot of math miracles associated with the Quran. Continuing now with number 5, let's look at the math miracle in Surah 83. So in 2 places, the 83rd Surah speaks of numerically structured books. Now the term numerically structured books in Arabic is the term Kitabun Markum. And these verses are believed to be evidence of God encoding the books and evidence of God being involved in the mathematical systems. And we read in the Quran, Surah 83 verses 7 to 9, it says, "Indeed, the book of the wicked is Sijin." Do you know what Sijin is? A numerically structured book. The math miracle involving opposites comes next. In Surah 89 verses 3 it says, "And by the even number and the odd number." So, as it's noted in the Quran, the number of angels and devils were both mentioned 88 times. Heat and coolness are both mentioned 4 times. Summer and winter are both mentioned once. Woman and man were both mentioned 24 times. Worry and assurance were mentioned 13 times each, as well as belief and disbelief are both mentioned 9 times. There's also a math miracle found in the 9th chapter of the Quran. So the first statement in the Quran is, "In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful." By the way, that consists of 19 Arabic letters known as the Basmala. It's actually the preface of every chapter except chapter 9 in the Quran. And although it is missing from chapter 9, when you look 19 chapters later, the Basmala happens twice in the Quran. So chapter 27 has a statement at its beginning, and in the verse 30 it says, "Indeed, it is from Solomon, and indeed it reads, in the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful." So this makes the total number of times that the Basmala occurs in the Quran 114, or 19 times 6 times, which is equal to the number of chapters in the Quran. Number 2 involves a miracle about many different numbers in the Quran. So yes, there are so many different ones, and as a matter of fact, number 7 is one of the main ones that come up in the Quran. So it seems like this number has a strong relationship with the way our universe was actually created and structured according to Muslim theology, because it's believed that the earth actually has 7 layers, as well as the atmosphere has 7 layers. It's believed that the universe has 7 different skies. This is often referred to as heavens. The sky, heavens, sometimes are used interchangeably. Also, the number of verses in the Quran that refer to the 7 skies is actually 7. And the first time the number 7 is mentioned in the Quran, it was in chapter 2 verses 29, when the Quran says, It is he who created for you all of that which is on the earth. Then he directed himself to the heaven, his being above all creation, and made them 7 heavens, and he is knowing of all things. And the final time the number 7 is mentioned in the Quran is in chapter 78, verses 12, where it says, and constructed above you 7 strong heavens. And the final math miracle in this episode that I'm going to share with you has to do with the earth. So this is a very fascinating thing. Let's take a look at the number of times that the term month was mentioned in the Quran, and that is 12 times. Day is also mentioned 365 times. Sea is mentioned 32 times. Land is mentioned 13 times. And sea plus land, which is 32 plus 13, equal 45. Now, apparently modern science has only recently discovered that the following figures actually represent the exact proportions of the sea and land on Earth. So the percentage of sea is 32 over 45 times 100%, which is 71%. And the percentage of land that the Earth is made up of goes by the figure of 13 over 45 times 100, which equals 28.8, and a whole bunch of 8s follow there, and that's your percentage. So it's about 71.1% of sea makes up the Earth, as well as 28.8% of the Earth is made up of land. Right into the video, starting at number 10, here we have living things formed from water. And the Quran says, do those who disbelieve not see that the heavens and the earth were sewn together, and then we unstitched them, and that we made from water every living thing? So will they not then believe? And that's taken from Surah 21 verses 30. Also in Surah 24 verses 45 it says, Allah created every living creature from water. Geological studies have confirmed that water is not only the first and the main compound in all living things, but also it precedes the existence of all created beings. Next up at number 9, we have the duality of creation. The Quran specifically says, and it is he who spread out the earth and set thereon mountains standing firm and flowing rivers, and the fruit of every kind he made in pairs, 2 and 2, male and female. He draws the night as a veil over the day. Behold, verily in these things are signs for those who reflect. This is taken from Surah 13 verses 3. Here we see things created in pairs. Now there's another verse in the Quran that says, he who has made for you the earth like a carpet spread out, has enabled you to go about therein by roads and channels, and has sent down water from the sky. With it we have produced diverse pairs of plants. And that's taken from Surah 20 verses 53. The Quran has several verses like this. Another one as an example, glory be to him who created all the pairs from what the earth produces, and from themselves, and from things unknown to them. And that's taken from Surah 36 verses 36. Moving on now to number 8, we're going to be looking at the female honeybee. Now check this out. Honeybees have 3 various forms. There's a queen bee, that's the reproductive female. Then there's the drone bee, which is the male. And then the worker bees are the non-reproductive females. Each of these have their role. The non-reproductive female bee is responsible for making the honey. And that's what the Quran speaks about in Surah 16 verses 68 to 69. It says as follows, your Lord revealed to the bees, build dwellings in the mountains and the trees, and also in the structures which men erect. Then eat from every kind of fruit and travel the paths of your Lord, which have been made easy for you to follow. From inside them comes a drink of varying colors, containing healing for mankind. There is certainly a sign in that for people who reflect. So in this verse, the verbs build, eat, and travel, they're written in the female form in the original Arabic language. But while we're on the topic of bees and honey, we have to mention at number 7 that honey brings healing. In chapter 16 of the Quran is Surah Al-Nahl, and that is translated as the bees in English. In this chapter, specifically in verse 69, this is what it has to say. Then eat from all of the fruits and follow the ways of your Lord laid down for you. There emerges from their bellies a drink varying in colors, in which there's healing for people. Indeed, this is a sign for those who reflect. So So I pretty much just read that in the previous entry, but research now shows that antibacterial and anti-inflammatory properties are found in honey. It also helps against infections and in the regrowth of tissue when our body is healing. Honey also contains antioxidants that help to prevent heart problems and cancer. Let's talk about gender at number 6. The Quran states that one's masculinity or femininity is actually created out of a drop of sperm that has been ejected. And the Quran says the following: He has created both sexes, male and female, from a drop of semen which has been ejected. That's taken from Surah 53 verses 45 to 46. And now it's widely known that human sex is determined by the male's sperm, with the female cells playing really no role in the sex determination process. Another miracle mentioned in the Quran is the alaka that clings to the uterus. Now, the following is a passage from the Quran. It says, "Then we formed the drop into an alaka and formed the alaka into a lump and formed the lump into bones and clothed the bones in flesh and then brought him into being as another creature. Glory be to Allah, the best of creators." This is taken from Surah 23 verses 14. Now, one thing to note is that the Arabic word alaka is used to describe leeches that cling to a body and feed off of the blood inside of the body. And it can be translated to mean a thing that clings to something. So comparing a leech to an embryo at the alaka stage, we can see that there's similarities between the two of them, not just in appearance, but also in function as well. And the word alaka can also be translated as blood clot. And we can see that the appearance of the embryo and its sacs during the alaka stage actually looks like a blood clot. Number 4 brings us humans formed in stages. Human reproduction, as science tells us, it actually takes place in various different stages. And the Quran also mentions this. In Surah 71, God created you in stages. Also, the Quran says He creates you in the wombs of your mothers in stages, one development after another, in 3 layers of darkness. That's taken from Surah 39 verses 6. Another pretty interesting miracle found in the Quran is about the prefrontal cortex. So check this out. The front part of the brain is called the prefrontal cortex, and it's responsible for coming up with lies. According to PubMed.gov, people who just lie, known as pathological liars, have more prefrontal white matter. And the Quran said that the disbelievers will be dragged from their lying forehead. In the Quran, Surah 96 verses 15 to 16, we can find a passage that says this: "But no, if he does not desist, He will certainly drag him by the forelock, a lying sinful forelock." Now, this is also translated as forehead. The original Arabic word nasia in this case refers to the frontal lobe of the brain where reasoning is processed, and from there people can come up with lies. Number 2 is also very fascinating. It's talking about bones that are formed before muscles. The first formation of actual bone happens at the jawbone at around 41 days, and then about 3 days later the muscles are formed. And now, we did read the following passage at number 5 in this episode, but there is something else to notice in the passage. Just to recap, it goes as follows: "Then we formed the drop into an alaka and formed the alaka into a lump and formed the lump into bones and clothed the bones in flesh and then brought him into being as another creature. Glory be to Allah, the best of creators." So what we can also see in this passage is the sequential formation of bones and flesh. And to end this episode off, we are going to be talking about fasting and its medical benefits. The Quran does mention this in Surah 2 verses 184. It says, "O you who believe, fasting is prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you, that you may become righteous, for a specified number of days. But whoever among you is sick or on a journey, then a number of other days. For those who are able, a ransom of feeding a needy person. But whoever volunteers goodness, it is better for him. But to fast is best for you, if you only knew." Nowadays, we know that intermittent fasting has been linked to numerous health benefits. And some of those benefits include reducing the risk of diabetes, reducing inflammation in the body, as well as lowering your blood pressure and also balancing your weight. It, however, is recommended that you consult with a medical professional when it comes to fasting, but studies do show that yes, fasting does have many benefits. And just like that, we come to the end of another episode. Really hope you guys enjoyed this one. And just so you know, we do have a similar video if you haven't seen already. We have one titled 10 Surprising Scientific Miracles in the Quran, where we don't just look at the biology, but we look at other sciences. So that video, very interesting one. I highly recommend it. I'll link to it below in the video description section. You'll also find a playlist with similar videos to this, so you can keep on learning. Thank you for joining me in another episode of FTD Facts. Look forward to seeing you in the next one. Later.